Thanks for downloading Ehnother Podcast from ehnotherpodcast.com. Today's show can be found in many ways. iTunes, the ehnotherpodcast.com webpage, and now can be found on Stitcher.com. You can now stream the latest show anywhere with the Stitcher app, on your computer, even on your boss's computer. Ehnother Podcast is now at your fingertips every day of the week and at your convenience. Enjoy today's episode of Warlock Wednesdays. ehnotherpodcast.com. Not a sponsor. Attention, Sudbury football fans! Do you want to win a trip to Super Bowl 48? I know I do. Let me tell you how you can do that. Joe McDonald Youth Football League is holding a raffle. They are selling tickets to win a trip for the Super Bowl in New York City. That's Super Bowl 48. You can win 2 tickets for you and a friend. You would also get $500 spending money, transportation to and from, that's your flight there and back, plus a hotel stay for 3 nights at a 4-star hotel. How do you get these wonderful tickets? Well, you buy a raffle ticket. And how do you buy a raffle ticket? Well, you can go to one of many locations. For those locations, you can go to joemcdonaldfootball.com, or you can just listen to my next little bit. They are Beef and Bird. You can get them there. Cubit Portable Storage. Dr. M. Staffen New Sudbury Chiropractic. Eddie's Restaurant and Sports Bar. Kicks Hot New Country 91.7 FM. Lockerbie Confectionery. The Lounge 390 at the Quality Inn. New North Fuels. New Sudbury Shopping Mall at the Lottery Center. Nickel Belt Camping. Pro-Am Sportswear. And at the Rainbow Mall at the Lottery Center. And if this is not good enough for you, well, you can place your order by phone. That phone number to call for those raffle tickets? 705-524-2970. How much do these tickets cost, you ask? Well, the Joe McDonald Youth Football League is entering its 20th season. So why not make the tickets $20? And they did! Tickets, $20. You can get them now. Win your trip. Go to Super Bowl 48. Who knows who's playing? Looks like Denver Broncos maybe, but hey, you get to be there if they are. So win your trip to New York City and Super Bowl 48 by visiting joemcdonaldfootball.com and picking up your raffle tickets, because it goes for a great cause, and hey, you might win a trip to New York City. Hello everyone and welcome to another week of the Warlock Hour. Greetings from the Emerald Island. I am over in Ireland this week, and actually I will be here for the next couple of weeks, so this is where the podcast will originate from. Different kind of setting this week, but that's alright, because I'm still going to do most of the stuff that I normally do with a little bit of extra thrown in. We're going to start where we always do, with the comic book releases. So your comic book releases for this week is from DC Comics Catwoman number 25, Damian, Son of Batman, number 2 of a 4-part miniseries. Then we have a run of number 25s. We have Flash number 25, Superman number 25, and Teen Titans number 25. From Marvel Comics this week, a slew of comics that I couldn't pare down to 5, so we're giving you 7 choices to choose from. All New X-Men number 19, Deadpool Annual number 1, Hawkeye number 14, Infinity number 6 of the 6-part miniseries, concluding off that part of the series, Kick-Ass 3 number 5 of an 8-part miniseries, Savage Wolverine number 12, and Uncanny Avengers number 14. From the Independents this week from Dynamite Entertainment is Cryptozoic Man number 2 of a 4-part miniseries. For those of you who watch Comic Book Men, this was the comic that was pitched in Season 2 by Brian Johnson and Walt Flanagan, and of course the team of Mike Zapsik, I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong, and Ming Chen. But Brian and Walt do most of the work, and this comic is their result. From IDW Publishing this week, almost as much as from Marvel Comics, a slew of titles for you to choose from. Doctor Who number 15, Ghostbusters number 10, Mr. Peabody and Sherman number 1 of a 4-part miniseries, I guess in preface to the movie that will be coming out sometime either late this year or early next. I didn't check the release date on that one. Star Trek number 27, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 28, and X-Files Season 10 number 6. And finally, from Image Comics this week, Walking Dead number 117. Those are your comic book releases for this week. I hope you find a title in there that you can enjoy. I know there's quite a few for me that'll be waiting for me back when I get back in Canada. Alright, so let's move on to the entertainment news. We are going to look at the box office numbers from this week, and what a gigantic weekend for Catching Fire, the second in the Hunger Games trilogy, which will actually be a movie quadrilogy since they are splitting the final book into 2 movies. This movie set November records. It finished with a box office total of $158 million, surpassing its original release, The Hunger Games, by quite a margin. Well, not that quite a margin, $6 million, but still doing very well to set the record for November. It fell short, however, of the biggest 2D openings of since these actuals were tallied, and it fell just behind Dark Knight Rises, which made $160 million, and Dark Knight, which made $158.4 million. It was also behind some 3D movies that had the added benefit of those 3D ticket pricings, and it was behind The Avengers, Iron Man 3, Harry Potter, and The Deathly Hallows Part 2. So it was behind those 3 movies, which all had the 3D advantage, but it was also behind. It was the third biggest 2D movie with that 158. Now, its worldwide total is over $316 million at this point in time, exceeding its budget by quite a margin. In fact, the budget for the film is listed as $130 million. We all know there's advertising costs to go in there. So even if they spent $20 to $30 million on advertising, they have already surpassed their budget in North America alone. There has been huge numbers going to see this film and are now anxiously awaiting next year's sequel, the third of the 4 movies, which will be next November. So let's move on to the list. Thor: The Dark World, which was obviously number 1 2 weeks in a row, has dropped to the number 2 spot, bringing in $14.1 million. The Best Man Holiday dropped to number 3, bringing in $12.4 million. Delivery Man debuts at $7.9 million in the 4th spot. So that one's doing fairly well considering what it had to open up against. Freebirds falls to the number 5 spot with $5.3 million. Las Vegas falls all the way down to number 6 at $4.3 million. Jackass Presents Bad Grandpa falls to the number 7 spot at $3.4 million. Gravity is slowly sinking down the list, 8th spot, $3.2 million. In 9th spot is 12 Years a Slave with $2.8 million, and jumping up 2 spots, Dallas Buyers Club, which has now reached 666 theaters, has brought in $2.6 million, and as it increases the theater numbers, those numbers could go up. We may see Dallas Buyers Club in the top 6 or 7 next week if they get some more theaters added, because it's doing very well, bringing in just over $4,000 per screen at the moment. One of the debuts that only opened on 1 screen, it was very limited release because it only opened in 1 theater as opposed to any other number of theaters. Frozen, which will be opening this weekend everywhere, or pretty much everywhere. $243,000 on the 1 screen. Not bad for only opening in 1 location. This movie is one of the ones opening up this week, as I said. The other two movies that are opening up this weekend for the American Thanksgiving weekend, Homefront, starring Jason Statham, and Oldboy, starring Josh Brolin. Those are two great movies to look forward to. Not so sure if they're quite Thanksgiving worthy. I guess that's where Frozen comes in. So that is your box office numbers. Now, before we move on to some entertainment news, James, as you know on the network here, has suggested that I kind of do a theater review of the movie that I saw over here in Ireland. I went to see Catching Fire on my first night at the local cinema, Swords Cinema. I can't remember if that's the name of the theater. I'm being told it is Movies at Swords, and that is the name of the cinema. I will say this, it was very quaint, it was nice, the seats were quite comfortable, although they were a little low to the ground for my liking. One thing I did notice that I really found is lacking in some of our cinemas back in Canada is that we were ushered to our seats. And when I say ushered to our seats, I mean someone came in with a flashlight and showed us exactly where we were sitting. Now, we did have reserved seating, so that made it even easier. But at the same time, somebody was there in case whatever happened, we could find our seats, and that was brilliant. And it became even more apparent how good it was when the lights started to go down for the advertisements. That was very much needed to have the person there to show people to their seats at that point. We were already seated. The movie itself was very good. The sound quality was pretty darn good. The picture quality, well, that was where it kind of lacked. As a projectionist at my local cinema, I did notice that on the right side of the screen there was kind of a blackness to it, and that to me says that the bulb was just about burnt or going to burn, and they just hadn't changed the bulb yet. Either that, or they did not do the settings correctly when they installed the new bulb. So that kind of distracted me at certain points in the film, mostly during the bright scenes because that was when it was really noticeable. However, generally speaking, I tried to ignore that part of the screen and focus on the film that was playing, which was fantastic, by the way. Hunger Games, Catching Fire, great movie. I guess if I had to rate anything, if I base this rating system on the Real Music 5 Reels scale, I would have to say I would give this movie theater a 4 reels out of 5. So that's pretty darn good. Oh, I do have to add one thing about the concessions. At my cinema, when you buy candy, you have to buy the bags of candy that they sell at the concession. At this theater, and apparently all across Ireland and possibly the UK, you can get candy, mixed bags, and just take scoops and throw it in, and they weigh the bag and you pay the candy. Now, I have seen this at some North American theaters, but I know at my theater it's not there, and that is an awesome idea. You could mix and match your candies. You don't have to buy just one bag and that's it. It was so good, and I enjoyed it very much, especially when I went to a second film, which was actually the 50th anniversary of the Doctor Who at a different cinema, but we're not reviewing that cinema at this point. The candy was definitely excellent. The movie was definitely excellent. But again, the Movies at Swords gets a 4 reels out of 5 ratings from this man right here. So let's move on to some entertainment news. First up, Warner Brothers has registered possible titles for the Man of Steel movie. Man of Steel 2 may have subtitles that include these: gems. I'm saying that questioningly because as I read the titles to you, you will probably do the same thing I did and go, huh? Alright, so let's see what they have registered. Man of Steel, Battle the Night, Knight spelt Knight. That's one title possibility. The next one, Man of Steel, Beyond Darkness. Man of Steel, Black of Night, again spelt with a K. Man of Steel, Darkness Falls. Man of Steel, Night Falls, once again with the K. Man of Steel, Shadow of the Night, this time the proper night, no K. Man of Steel, The Blackest Hour, and finally, Man of Steel, The Darkness Within. Personally, I don't like any of these titles, and they're worse than Batman vs. Superman, which I still refuse to call that movie. I am still calling it Man of Steel 2 or World's Finest. Those are the titles that I approve of. However, I am not Warner Brothers. Moving on, the writer from the Watchmen movie has signed on with Sony and Dreamworks Entertainment to write the script for Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo is the Sony PlayStation's successful racing franchise game. They are, I believe, up to Gran Turismo 6 at the moment. Gran Turismo 6, which was released earlier this year. This is capitalizing on, of course, the whole racing car type movies. We have the Fast and the Furious franchise, which has been very successful, and recently we've seen the trailers for the Need for Speed franchise, or possible franchise, and it's basically just there's some kind of plot going around, and it involves racing cars. So we'll have to see what comes of this, but Watchmen writers are on board for this film to be possibly greenlit through Dreamworks and Sony. Moving on, Norman Reedus is in rumors to be in talks to be up for a role in the reboot of The Crow. He would not be playing the lead character, and that just sucks, because if they're going to have somebody play the Crow, why not Norman Reedus? Unfortunately, that has already been cast, and Luke Evans will be playing the role of Eric. It is rumored that he will be playing a character called James, and other than the fact that that's his name, it is unknown if this will be one of Eric Draven's allies or enemies at this point. I figure if they're going to cast a man of Norman Reedus' significance, he would probably be your protagonist for the film, and it'll be interesting to see how he does in a bad guy role for the first time in a while. He's been a good guy for so long, or kind of the anti-hero in some cases for so long, that you're more likely to root for him than you would for the Crow in this case. But we'll have to see what the writers come up with, if he's even cast for that role. So all the buzz that happened at BlizzCon a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago now, has lent credence to the fact that Duncan Jones, the director of the Warcraft movie, has now left another film so that he can focus his attention on the Warcraft film. He was originally slated to direct the movie called Fleming, which would be a biopic about, of course, James Bond's creator, Ian Fleming. However, he decided to leave this project as he could not devote enough time to do this, with the Warcraft movie set to go into production in January for a December 2015 release date. This leaves the now Fleming biopic without a director, and as of this moment, no interest or no feelers have been put out as to who might be the director to take over. Recent rumors suggested that the show Arrow would possibly cross over into the DC Cinematic Universe. However, Greg Berlanti, the executive producer, has said these rumors are false, and currently, and I quote, "We haven't had any of those conversations other than to say what characters are we allowed to use this year and advocate or request certain ones that are of interest to us. And every now and then they'll say, you can't have that guy. They don't say why, and we figure out why later on." So right now, there are no plans to connect the television series Arrow to the DC Cinematic Universe. Sorry, James, I know you're anxious to see that, but as of right now, that's not even in the works. Moving on to another rumor, Ang Lee, the director of Life of Pi and the horrible Hulk movie, is been rumored, thanks to Vin Diesel's Facebook, that he will be directing the Kojak film, which will star Vin Diesel. In fact, the only words that Vin Diesel posted that signified these rumors were Kojak, New York, and Ang Lee. So he's done this in the past where he's kind of posted stuff out of without getting permission from possibly the companies behind it all. So we are still waiting, of course, confirmation that Ang Lee would be directing the Kojak movie starring Vin Diesel. However, if he could bring some of the good directing styles that he brought to Life of Pi and leave the Hulk directing styles behind, it possibly could be good. Unfortunately, Life of Pi was quite the drama as opposed to an action film. And Kojak, in this day and age, would have to be classified as an action film. I know it's based on A Private Eye. I don't remember watching the show. It's kind of before my time. 1973 to 1978. I mean, I was 2 years old when it went off the air. So, it's kind of before my time. I do know that it was... it followed the... NYPD detective named Kojak, who had a penchant for lollipops and his catchphrase, "Who loves you, baby?" Well, this would be a action movie of sorts. There would be some action to it, and as we all saw with the Hulk, starring Eric Bana, and maybe it was the writing too, Ang Lee just could not handle it, and he's done some action movies in the past that have worked out, so who knows. But as of right now, I'd be leery on that fact. However, again, Ang Lee being the director is just a rumor. Speaking of a director that is not a rumor, Edgar Wright has a couple of statements that have come out about the Ant-Man movie. He was asked about the tone of the film and the way it will play into Marvel's strategy. Wright said at this question, "Well, I think Marvel movies are funny, you know. I think generally the Iron Man films and the Avengers is funny. They're not ever in the comedy section, but they are funny and entertaining. So I think it'll be something similar in vein to that." When the interviewer asked how he intends to make Ant-Man a household name, he said, "I want to make him into a badass." No, I always liked that comic, and I always thought it would be an interesting thing to see in live action. That's why I showed that Comic-Con test that we did for Marvel to show this fight scene like a proof of content. Like, this is what the action is going to look like. I think a lot of people who maybe don't know the character sort of see that test and go, "Oh, right, I get it. It's like an action film." So that's the idea. I think people will be surprised by what kind of movie it is, and so in that respect, it's something that I know is going to stand out, because it's got a very different story, and it is a very different movie. Of course, we all know Edgar Wright is the director behind the Cornetto trilogy, which is the Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End, so we do know he has that penchant for humor and slapstickiness, and action, because if you've watched those movies, there are great action sequences, especially in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. World's End was a lot more comedic action sequences, but there was still some there. So I think with this, on top of the fact that he did Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, we are going to see a great Ant-Man movie once it gets made, and we get to see it in 2015. That is it for the entertainment news for this week, so I'll take a little break, and I'll be back with some sports.
Hi, I'm Rob Succhetto, and you're listening to Ehnother Podcast.com.
Hello out there, all you NFL fans. Do you like to pick the winners of each game every week? Well, guess what? So do I. Right now, you're listening to the Warlock Hour here on Warlock Wednesdays. We're about to go into sports, but before we do, I just want to tell you that every Thursday you can listen to Warlock Hour Presents NFL Pick'em. That's right, me and a few friends sit down and we pick the winners of each game every week. We have fun doing it, and you can listen along and maybe even pick against us. Listen to a few amateur analysts as we give our opinions on each game every week, and we pick the winners and compete against each other, just a friendly competition, and we have fun doing it. So if you'd like to tune in and listen to that, that's tomorrow, Thursdays, on Ehnotherpodcast.com. Ehnother Podcast.com, a Canadian podcast network. And we're back with some sports. We're going to start off this week with the NFL, and we're going to go right to the injury report. The injury report for this week has some Kansas City Chiefs who are on the injury report. Those Kansas City Chiefs who actually lost this week by giving up a whopping 41 points to the San Diego Chargers, a team that had held its first 9 opponents to 17 points or less, has given up an average of 34 points in the last 2 games. That is ridiculous and goes to show you what I've been saying all along. Their 9-0 record was an aberration. They played some weak teams. They got lucky in one of those weeks where they beat the Chargers. This is definitely a Kansas City team that is on a 2-game losing streak going into a huge game against the Denver Broncos in this Week 13, where when they lose, because I totally expect them to lose to the Broncos again, they will be a team that was 9-0, dropping to 9-3. Now, they will still be in playoff contention, as the AFC is pretty weak other than the division leaders. So, that being said, they suffered 2 huge injuries this week. First of all, linebacker Justin Houston was diagnosed with a dislocated elbow, and it was so dislocated that on Monday he could not even have an MRI because there was too much swelling in the area, which means he's not going to have the MRI till sometime on Tuesday. Now, let me give you an indication of when I'm recording this. It is technically only 6:45 p.m. on East Coast Standard Time. I am in Ireland, which means it is 11:45 p.m., so I don't have any more news at this time about the MRI of what happened in that, but rest assured, I believe he will not be playing on Sunday. That being said, the other linebacker, Tamba Hali, is said to have a slight sprain, according to Coach Andy Reid, and he has made big improvements since Sunday when the injury occurred. Now, both Hali and Houston, in the first meeting against the Broncos, were basically a non-factor. The Chiefs have not touched quarterbacks in the last 2 games. They've only had 2 sacks, in fact, in their last 4 games. And when they played Peyton Manning the first time, who was a little hobbled, they never touched him. They didn't sack him, they didn't knock him down, and now they're missing possibly 1 or possibly 2 of their pass rushing defensive stars, which means Denver might be able to run or throw all over them, since there will be no pressure on Peyton Manning whatsoever. So let's move on to some other injury reports. The Miami Dolphins are reporting that running back Daniel Thomas will be out an extended period after tearing a ligament in his ankle. Brandon Whedon of the Bears will likely be the Week 13 starter because Jason Campbell has gone down with a concussion. Whedon was booed by Cleveland fans when he came in to replace Campbell in Sunday's loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Browns are definitely in search of a quarterback, much like the Bills were earlier in the year. Denver Broncos running back Noshawn Moreno was sporting crutches and a walking boot Sunday night after limping off the field. He and cornerback Dubnyk Rogers-Cromartie are both expected to have MRIs done and see how long they will be out. Noshaw Moreno, of course, was on his best pace as a running back this year, and this might open the door for Monte Ball, their young rookie. However, it does hurt Denver Broncos' chances losing their star running back. New York Jets running back, meanwhile, Chris Ivory, is described as having both an upper and lower sprain to his ankle, and he's not got a true high ankle sprain. However, ankles are definitely tough to deal with when you're a running back. Buffalo Bills wide receivers Stevie Johnson and Robert Woods have both returned to practice after missing the Week 11 victory over the Jets, and are both expected to play against the Atlanta Falcons in Toronto when the Buffalo Bills continue their Toronto series by playing the Atlanta Falcons on December, I believe the Sunday is the 2nd? No, the 1st. So, there you go. E.J. Manuel will obviously take the field with now a healthy complement of wide receivers, and that's actually good news on the injury front. Moving on, Coach Mark Trestman said Monday that Matt Forte has sustained a slight hyperextension in his right knee during the loss to the Rams. The Bears will review his status on Wednesday, though Trestman is optimistic. Also, Jay Cutler remains week to week with a high ankle sprain, although at this point, Trestman does not expect him to be available when the Bears take on the Vikings this weekend. Some of the takeaways from Week 12, obviously the New England Patriots defeating the Denver Broncos in that muffed punt kind of thing, the fumbled punt, forced Denver's hand, so to speak, as now New England kind of controls their own destiny in the hunt for the AFC number 1 overall seed and home field advantage throughout the playoffs, or at least for the AFC. If this happens, Denver will have a tough time going through New England. However, I believe this is an aberration, and Denver will prevail when it counts, and that is in the playoffs. As I said earlier, the San Diego Chargers put up 41 points against the Kansas City Chiefs this past week. You add that into the 27 points that Denver put on them the week before, and the 400-plus yards that Buffalo put up against them, even though Buffalo did lose that game. The Kansas City Chiefs defense is looking like they weren't as good as they thought they were. So we'll have to see what happens there. The St. Louis Rams surprised the Chicago Bears, doubling them up 42-21 this past week, and Zach Stacy racked up chunks of yards against the Bears defense that looked really like it hadn't showed up. Matt Forte's play was good in that game, but when you're compared to a running back that kind of ran all over the place, they basically ran for 258 yards against this Bears defense. And some people might say, what Bears defense? And I would agree. Tavon Austin, the young rookie sensation for the Rams at wide receiver, as Zach Stacy is also a rookie, had a 65-yard touchdown run against this weak Bears defense. And have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers finally showed up? They have now won 3 straight games, if I'm not mistaken, as they defeated the Detroit Lions 24-21. That's right, the powerful, or some thought powerful, Detroit Lions lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 24-21. That is very strange and sad indeed. Although, if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, you're probably happy right now. Jacksonville Jaguars have won again. They beat the Houston Texans this time. what is happening with these teams that sucked for the first 12 games of the season? They're actually winning football games now. Well, that's what happens in the NFL. Any team can win on any given Sunday. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have shown that maybe the Houston Texans need something done dramatically. They lost to the team that has given up the most points in the entire NFL and could only put up 6 points. That, my friends, says you need an overhaul. Finally, I want to take a look at something that rarely happens in football and in the NFL. A tie. Yes, we had a tie this week. Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings tied at 26. We'll get into more of this probably tomorrow when we do NFL Pick'em. But for now, all I want to say is this. The Packers are happy they signed, thinking that they're happy that they signed Matt Flynn. But Flynn or Aaron Rodgers could be under center on Thanksgiving Thursday for the Green Bay Packers, but they're not sure which yet. Aaron Rodgers has taken to the practice field. However, it's not sure what's going to happen until we get to probably Wednesday, and that'll obviously determine it. And since I can't record on Wednesday and put it out on Wednesday, I can't tell you what's going to happen. If I were to guess, I think the Green Bay Packers want Aaron Rodgers to start, but they're not going to rush him back and hurt their chances down the road, so we could see Matt Flynn starting for the Green Bay Packers this week. So let's look at those standings now that I've talked about a few games. In the AFC, we have the AFC East led by those Patriots who are now 8-3. The New York Jets are now sitting at 5-6, as are the Miami Dolphins. Right behind them is the Buffalo Bills at 4-7. In the AFC North, it's the Cincinnati Bengals leading the division with a 7-4 record, followed closely by the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, who both sit at 5-6, while the Cleveland Browns round out that division at 4-7. The AFC South has had some changes. The Indianapolis Colts are now 7-4. They have dropped a couple of games where it's looked like they should have won, and now they're kind of falling back a bit, which kind of begs the question, are they going to be able to hold on? The Tennessee Titans are coming up from behind at 5-6, followed by the aforementioned Jacksonville Jaguars, who've now won 2 games at 2-9, and the ever-sinking Houston Texans round out that division at also 2-9. In fact, those 2-9 records put them at the bottom of the NFL. The Denver Broncos are leading the AFC West at 9-2, which means they do hold that number 1 seed currently, and that's the seed they want to hold on to if they hope to beat the Patriots in the playoffs. Kansas City Chiefs, as I said, lose 2 straight and are 9-2. I'm predicting they will fall to 9-3 when they lose to the Denver Broncos again this weekend. San Diego Chargers are sitting at 5-6, while the Oakland Raiders round out the AFC West at 4-7. Over in the NFC, that NFC East division, way still up for grabs. Cowboys sitting at 6-5. Also, so are the Eagles at 6-5. Unfortunately, the Giants took a hard loss this week, losing to those aforementioned Cowboys. They are now 4-7 and 2 games back in the loss column, which is where you don't want to be. So New York Giants need to win some games if they want to try and claim that division, although it's probably going to come down to either Dallas or Philly. The NFC North looks convoluted as well, as the Detroit Lions and Chicago Bears both sit at 6-5, while the Green Bay Packers, thanks to that tie, are 5-1. The Minnesota Vikings, meanwhile, are 2-8-1, and while that keeps them out of last place because of the tie, they still need to start winning some games if they don't want to be in last place. In the NFC South, we have the 9-2 New Orleans Saints leading the way, and followed closely by the Carolina Panthers. Now, folks, pay attention, because that game is this week's flex move. The NFL has decided to move that game from a 4 o'clock start on Sunday to the prime time 8:30 p.m. start, so that they can get more national exposure, as that game will determine at that point who is first in that division. If the Carolina Panthers win, they will be 9-3, as will the New Orleans Saints. But due to the victory over the Saints, the Panthers would have the number 1 spot. Now, if the New Orleans Saints wins, that would put them at 10-2, and they wouldn't have to worry about that spot against the Carolina Panthers. Rounding out the division, as I said, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have now won 3 straight games, and they are 3-8. The Atlanta Falcons, meanwhile, have lost 5 straight games and are battling for that last place spot with those other 2-9 teams. Moving over to the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks have the only record with 1 blemish, and they are 10-1 at this point. San Francisco, that just messed up my talking. San Francisco 49ers, there we go, are 7-4 with their big win on Monday night. And the Arizona Cardinals are also 7-4 in that division, while the St. Louis Rams are surprising a lot of teams this year, sitting at 5-6. Now, they probably won't make the playoffs, but their future looks bright with some of their young rookies. So that's your standings. Let's take a look at some statistics. Your passing leaders, first off, of course, Peyton Manning still leads the way with 3,722 passing yards, followed by Drew Brees at 3,647 passing yards. Matt Stafford is third on that list with 3,495 passing yards. Phillip Rivers, fourth, 3,381 passing yards. And rounding out the top 5, 3,160 passing yards, is Matt Ryan. Moving over to the touchdown passes, of course, again, Peyton Manning leads the way with 36, Drew Brees 28, Matt Stafford 24, Tony Romo 23, and the top 5 is rounded out by Phillip Rivers with 22. Your rushing yards leaders are currently LaShawn McCoy. He is the only one over 1,000 yards at this point at 1,009. Adrian Peterson has 997, Alfred Morris has 970, Marshawn Lynch with 925, and rounding out the top 5, Jamal Charles with 918. Your rushing touchdown leaders are currently Adrian Peterson with 10, then Noshawn Moreno and Marshawn Lynch each have 9, with Jamal Charles having 8. Then we have 3 more to round out your top 5, Matt Forte, Frank Gore, and Stephon Ridley, all with 7 rushing touchdowns. Your receiving yard leaders currently are Calvin Megatron Johnson. He has 1,198 reception yards. Antonio Brown, 1,044 yards. A.J. Green with 1,020 yards. Andre Johnson with 1,002 yards, playing on that lowly Houston team that just seems to be sinking further and further. I feel sorry for the man sometimes. And then Josh Gordon has 988 reception yards. Your reception touchdown leaders are tight end Jimmy Graham of the Saints with 11. Also with 11 is Calvin Megatron Johnson. Then we have another tight end who has 10, and that's Julius Thomas of the Denver Broncos. And then our top 5 is rounded out by 2 more Denver Broncos, Demaryius Thomas with 10 touchdowns and Wes Welker with 9 touchdowns. Now there are 2 other people with 9 touchdowns, and they are tight end Vernon Davis and wide receiver Brandon Marshall. Moving on to the defensive side of things, Carlos Dansby is still your solo tackle leader with 85 tackles. Navario Bowman has 80. Paul Posluszny has 79. Vontaze Burfict has 77. And running out the top 5 is D'Amico Ryans with 76. Your sack leaders currently are Robert Mathis with 14.5, Robert Quinn with 13, then we have 2, Justin Houston and Mario Williams, each with 11. Chandler Jones, though, rounds up your top 5 with 10.5. And then your interception leaders, these are always a bunch of people tied closely together. First of all, your top 3, Alteron Werner, Antrell Roll, and DeAndre Levy, all with 5. And then we have the following slew of people with 4, Aqib Talib, Brendan Boykin, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Dimitri Patterson, Sean Lee, Tremaine Brock, and finally Kiko Alonso. Those are your interception leaders. Moving on to the NHL. Okay, so we have our NHL 3 stars. Evgeny Malkin of the Pittsburgh Penguins is your first star. He led all skaters with 7 assists and 1 goal for a total of 8 points. as the Penguins won 3 of their 4 games to reclaim the first place in the Metropolitan Division. Your second star for the Montreal Canadiens, Max Pacioretty, who had 5 goals to lead all players with that, and 2 of those goals were game winners. And your third star from the Edmonton Oilers, Dubnyk, goaltender Devan Dubnyk, posted a 2-0 record with a .50 goals against average and a .974 save percentage. He made 14 saves for his first shutout of the season in a 7-0 victory over the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then also posted a 4-1 victory over the Florida Panthers. Speaking of hockey, huge news out of the NHL on Tuesday. NHL and Rogers Communication reach a gigantic deal. Beginning with the 2014-2015 season, the Rogers Communication will be the sole media and broadcast rights partner with the NHL in Canada for the foreseeable future. They signed a 12-year agreement for $5,232,000,000 Canadian dollars, and that will take them through the 2025-2026 season. That's a 12-year deal. Now, this agreement gives Rogers national rights to all NHL games, including the Stanley Cup playoffs and the Stanley Cup final, on all of its platforms in all languages. In addition to exclusive rights for all playoff and cup final games, Rogers has exclusive rights to special events such as future NHL All-Star games and NHL drafts. Now, first thing I thought of was poor CBC and Hockey Night in Canada. Hockey Night in Canada has been a staple for a long time. In fact, it's over 60 years that Hockey Night in Canada has been on the air. People have grown up on it, and they will continue to grow up on it at least for the next 4 years. Yes, in fact, the Rogers Communications has said that at least for the next 4 years, CBC will still have Hockey Night in Canada. However, the plan is to have them to be... They will no longer be under CBC production control. Editorial content or on-air talent associated with Hockey Night in our Hockey Night in Canada telecasts will all be organized by Rogers. CBC will not receive any of the revenue generated from Hockey Night in Canada broadcasts, but they will also now no longer pay the production costs. So while all the revenue is going to Rogers, it's not going to cost CBC anything except for the time slot for their television, which means they can pump out ads to show their own shows during some of the commercial breaks, along with obviously the ads that Rogers organizes. Now, the next thing in line after that was when I found out that, okay, for the next 4 years anyways, Hockey Night in Canada is safe. Well, one of the staples of Hockey Night in Canada has always been Coach's Corner with Don Cherry. The future of Don Cherry and the Coach's Corner, well, Keith Peely, president of Rogers Media, has indicated that Cherry's role will be part of an evaluation process between Rogers, the NHL, and CBC that will take place in the coming months and years. This hopefully tells me that Don Cherry's job is safe at the moment, but within this next 4-year block, we might lose him, and that kind of sucks because he is part of Hockey Night in Canada. So, again, the huge deal by Rogers will see them controlling all NHL rights in Canada. Now, TVA will take control of all Canadian French language multimedia rights, including 22 Montreal Canadian games per season. TSN will still have regional rights, and I believe I did read somewhere that due to this certain agreement, there were concessions made where on, I believe, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, there will be no blackouts for any games that are involving Canadian teams. So that is good for those of you who want to watch your team, and normally you can't because of blackout. Well, now it doesn't matter, because if it's a Canadian team on one of those 3 nights, it will be on a Rogers station somewhere. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the standings for the NHL, and we'll start in the Eastern Conference and in the Atlantic Division. Your division leader is Boston Bruins with 34 points, followed by the Tampa Bay Lightning with 31, and the Toronto Maple Leafs with 29. In the Metropolitan Division, it is the Pittsburgh Penguins leading the way with 31 points. Washington Capitals have 26 points in second, and the New York Rangers round out that division with 24. Your two current wildcard holders are the Detroit Red Wings with 29 points, and the Montreal Canadiens with 28 points. Moving over to the Western Conference, the much tougher division, or the much tougher conference, in the Central Division, we have the Chicago Blackhawks leading the way there with 38 points. St. Louis Blues are second with 37 points. The Colorado Avalanche are third with 34 points. In the Pacific Division, we have the Anaheim Ducks leading the way with 37 points. San Jose Sharks with 35 points. And then followed by the Los Angeles Kings, also with 35 points. Your two wild cards in the West currently are the Minnesota Wild with 34 points and the Phoenix Coyotes with 32 points. To give you an indication of how tough that conference really is, if they were to pare down just the top 16, more teams would come out of the West than the East. In fact, only one team in the East is lower than in the West, is lower than the entire East, and that is Edmonton. They have 16 points, while Florida, New York Islanders all have 19, and then Calgary has 20 points, which would put them ahead of both the New York Islanders and the Florida Panthers. It's just crazy in the West how good they are, especially when they play the East. So the Eastern Conference needs to pick up its bootstraps, otherwise it could find itself on the short end of a Stanley Cup this season. Let's look at some statistics, and unfortunately I have to say Sidney Crybaby Crosby is leading your points with 31. He's followed by Alex Steen with 29, Henrik Zetterberg has 28, and then Alexander Ovechkin and Ryan Getzlaf each have 27. Your goals leader is Alexander Ovechkin, currently with 20 goals. Second behind him is Alexander Steen with 19, and then Steven Stamkos, who is still currently injured, with 14. Crybaby Crosby and Getzlaf each have 13 goals. Your assist leader is Evgeny Malkin with 23 assists. Joe Thornton of the Sharks has 22. Nick Backstrom of the Capitals with 19. Also Duncan Keith of the Blackhawks has 19, while Crybaby Crosby has 18. Your plus-minus leaders, Dustin Penner from the Ducks with 18. John Braun, is 16, plus 16. And then Alexander Steen, Ryan Getzlaf, and Marian Hossa are all plus 15. Your goaltending statistics, your goaltending leaders for the goals against average is Ben Scrivens with a 1.44 goals against, followed by Josh Harding with 1.48, Tuukka Rask 1.69, Corey Schneider with 1.87, and then Carey Price with 2.05. Save percentage leader is also Ben Scrivens at a 947 save percentage, Tuukka Rask at 943 save percentage, Josh Harding with 939, Robin Lerner 938, and Carey Price with 935. Your wins leaders are currently Corey Crawford with 16 wins, followed by Ben Bishop with 14, and then we have Josh Harding, Tuukka Rask, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Yaroslav Halak, all with 13 wins. Your shutout leaders, well, we have a slew of twos, so your leader right now is Ben Scrivens, who has 3 shutouts, and then let's see how fast I can get through these guys that have 2 shutouts. Ben Bishop, Josh Harding, Tuukka Rask, Marc-Andre Fleury, Yaroslav Halak, Antti Niemi, Roberto Luongo, Jonas Hiller, Martin Brodeur, Henrik Lundqvist, Cam Talbot, Jean-Sebastien Giguère. Those are your 2 shutout goaltenders. That is your NHL statistics for the week. And that will wrap up this week's edition. Now, normally there would be the WWE section. Unfortunately, because I've been away, I have not had a chance to watch Survivor Series yet. So we are not going to do the results. Some of you will probably already know, those of you that watch, obviously. I do not know at this point, so I'm not going to reveal the results and cheat my way out of watching the event. However, I will say this, I will add it into the description after Wednesday or after I view it at some point, so that it will be at least in the description, and we'll see how my performances do. Or better yet, I might even save it for next week, and we'll do it as a quick little add-on to the show. So that is it for this week. I hope you enjoyed Warlock Wednesdays. It's a little bit shorter this week. As I said, I was going to do things a little differently, but that's okay. I think we got all the information in that we needed to, and we even got a little movie review in there. So that is it from Ireland for this week. We'll be back in Ireland again next week as I do episode 52. This is 1 week shy of being a full year of Warlock Hour here on Warlock Wednesdays. So remember to come back next week and listen into the show, as it'll be 1 year show, 1 year anniversary, and I'm glad to be doing it over here in Ireland. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back. And remember, to find all our shows on the network, you can go to ehnotherpodcast.com. That's EHNOTHER podcast.com. Find us on Mondays for Ehnother Podcast with James and OJ. You can listen on Tuesdays to Real Tuesdays and Real Music with OJ and James. And then here on Wednesdays, you listen to the Warlock Hour with me, Razor. And of course, on Thursdays, you can listen to NFL Pick'em as myself, Adam, and Tyler, or some combination of the three of us, will sit down and do our amateur analysis to give you our NFL picks for the week. Again, I hope you enjoyed the show and come back next week. Thank you all for listening. I'm out. Thanks for listening to Ehnother Podcast from Ehnotherpodcast.com. Don't forget to go on iTunes and or download right from Ehnotherpodcast.com. That's EHNOTHER podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at Ehnother Podcast. Be sure to check back for tomorrow's show only on Ehnother Podcast, your Canadian podcast network. Ehnotherpodcast.com. Not a sponsor.